Well, it's pretty clear the people have spoken and the electoral funding bill is dead. The opposition indicated to the government last night that the bill shouldn't be introduced today, and if it was introduced today, we would oppose it. Obviously, I've had further discussions with my colleagues this morning, and the firm view that I've now formed is that this is not the right time for a bill like this, and it simply won't be supported by the coalition. Not now, not for the foreseeable future.
Is the dead or delayed?
Public backlash to tell you this was a good idea. You were supporting this 5 days ago.
Look, there's been quite a long process here. Successive special ministers of state have been talking to our shadow ministers about this, going back 3 or 4 years at least, and over that time there's been a number of good faith discussions between the Federal Director of the Liberal Party, the Federal Director of the Labor Party and other party officials. And look, there is an argument for public funding. There is an argument. It would make political parties less dependent upon donations that may not always be made for entirely altruistic reasons. But obviously we're at the fag end of a very contentious parliament. Obviously we do have a budget emergency at this time, and given the fact that there have been a lot of significant cuts in the budget, it was going to be a very big ask to say to the public, we are cutting you, but oh, by the way, here's $60 million in additional public funding for political parties. So my colleagues have been listening to the electorate, and we have listened, we have learned, and this bill is dead.
You put your commitment in writing. How was the official line from the coalition a week on this, and we haven't sent the legislation? Just whether Mr. Dreyfus released today said that you said he sent the draft, and Dreyfus said he sent you the final copy recently.
Well, we had seen a draft, but we certainly hadn't seen a final copy, and we only got what the government proposed to be the final copy after question time yesterday. Any legislation like this obviously has to go through a full due process. We've got to take it to the shadow cabinet, we've got to take it to the party room. It was pretty obvious from discussions with my colleagues yesterday that there were very serious reservations inside the coalition party room, inside the shadow cabinet, just as pretty obviously there have been serious reservations inside the caucus. And as I said, something for which there is a reasonable argument can be trumped by the particular circumstances of this time.
When did you finally form your view that this was not a goer? Was it last night or was it not till this morning? And were you rolled by your own leadership team on this question?
Well, we informed the government at about 7:30 last night that we needed more time to consider this, and if it was introduced into the parliament today, we would be voting against it. And it was absolutely obvious a little before then, in a phone hookup of the federal executive of the Liberal Party, that there was little, if any, support for this and a great deal of instinctive opposition to this. And obviously there's been a widespread public reaction against this. Now, in the end, democratic political leaders have got to be conscious of the mood of the public. We're at the fag end of a very contentious parliament.
You're denying that you were rolled by your own leadership team on this as late as this morning. Are you denying that quite clearly?
We're at the end of a very contentious parliament. My job is to be a credible alternative government and to win the coming election. It's not to try to see rammed through the parliament a bill to provide extra funding to political parties.
Mr. Abbott, you put your commitment in writing. What does this say about the value of your signature on a letter to the government?
As I said, before the government went ahead with the bill, we'd indicated that our support could no longer be taken for granted. We'd indicated before the government went ahead with the bill that we were having serious reservations about it, and that if it had come into the Parliament today and been voted upon, we wouldn't be supporting it. The important thing here is that we have listened carefully to the Australian people. Now, there was an argument for public funding of political parties. There was an argument, but the argument has plainly been trumped by the current circumstances. We've got a difficult budget. The coalition obviously is looking for significant expenditure reductions, and plainly this is not the time, at a time when we are asking people to tighten their belts, to be giving extra money to political parties.
If you were rolled by your own leadership team,
all the things that you've just said there, all the arguments that you've just made have been apparent for some time. What does this say about your judgment in judging Move Australia?
Well, I think the matters that you refer to, Chris, have been apparent since the beginning of this week. I don't think matters were quite so apparent last week, but the fact is my colleagues and I listened to what was clearly the message of the Australian people, and we've responded appropriately, and this bill is now dead.
So if you were rolled by your own leadership team, what does that say about your leadership and your authority within your leadership team?
Well, I certainly don't accept here the characterisation that you put on it, and I think that if we were prepared to be less gotcha about these things, we would have a much more constructive political dialogue. But I've had ongoing discussions with my colleagues. I've obviously been listening to the developing reaction to this particular bill. I'm conscious of the fact that there was a very serious reaction to it inside the caucus as well, so reservations were not confined to my side of politics. Decent people inside the caucus, including people who in a different time were rather in favour of this measure, have now decided that this isn't the right move at the right time. So we've listened, we've learned, and this bill is dead.
Mr. Abbott, could I ask, this has been an unedifying episode for both parties. Couldn't some good out of it come if you were to simply excise the element that is the most contentious, that's the extra 60 million, and take at least some reforms which will improve the system some degree?
Well, I think the issue which has exercised the public, understandably and rightly exercised the public, is the idea that at a time of serious budget stringency, that extra money should be going to political parties. Now, that's the contentious element. That, frankly, is the whole point of the bill, and that's why the bill is now dead.
Mr. Abbott, on the NBN,
in your letter to the Labor Party, you didn't mention anything about the need for due process or consultation with your colleagues. You were unequivocally saying you would support the bill. Why was that?
Well, it's understood that everything is subject to due process. I mean, no legislation is supported by the coalition until it has gone through the shadow cabinet and the party room.
Your letter
now,
says the same thing about that. Your letter says, I am satisfied with the agreement reached and indicate the coalition's intention to support the legislation and deal with it as requested before the end of sittings.
but inevitably and quite properly, intentions are naturally subject to the shadow cabinet and to the party room. That's just the way our party works.
Mr. Abbott, you also wrote this letter after saying there was a budget. You also wrote this letter after saying there was a budget emergency. So after telling the public there was a budget emergency, you then agreed to spend this money. Do you regret that? Do you want to apologise to the public for wanting to do this?
What I'm saying is that the public have spoken and the bill is dead. And the bill is dead because the coalition said to the government at about 7:30 last night that it shouldn't be introduced, and if it was introduced and proceeded with today, it wouldn't be supported by the coalition. So, look, you can say we should have said this yesterday or we should have said this last week, but we have said it, we've said it today, and we've got a good outcome for the Australian public. Thank you.
Concerns about the asbestos.